Hello, everyone. Thanks for the folks that are joining in with us here. We'll just get started in a couple of minutes. In the meantime, you can introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know who you are, your affiliation, and where you're tuning in from today. I see we have Molly Crouch with Sodexo. Nice to see you. Anupama is on Efren's board member. Hi, thanks so much for joining us. We have David, who's one of our wonderful donors calling in from Long Beach. Hello. We have Lucy from WW, formerly known as Weight Watchers. Thanks so much for joining us, Lucy. We have a Mike. We have Molly's calling in from Orlando. Jennifer, also on our FRN board. Gary Oppenheimer, who's on our advisory board with Ample Harvest. Hello. Ali from Kroger, one of our supporters. This is great. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining. We'll get started in just another minute or so. Amazing. I've seen so many great chats already in. I see my grandpa's on the call. Hi, Grandpa. Thank you all for continuing to send in your name and your affiliation and where you're calling in from. To briefly introduce myself, my name is Cassie, and I work here at FRN National as the manager of stakeholder engagement. Today, I will be our moderator for the conversation and helping to lead Katie and Regina through all the great talking points that they have with us here today. So without further ado, I will get us started. So welcome to Food Recovery Network's Roundtable Talks. If you are new here and you haven't attended a Roundtable Talk before, this is a time for us to be able to share a bit about our data and our key learnings. Although it's the start of 2022, we are about halfway through our program year since it runs the academic year. So Katie and Regina will be able to share a snapshot of what the last 6 months have looked like and all the data that we've been able to gather and the learnings that we have obtained and how that'll inform our work ahead. Our session here is being recorded, and so we'll make sure to send the recording out after. And I definitely encourage folks to engage in the chat like you've already done so thus far, share your ideas and your thoughts. And then we'll make sure to answer any questions that you have throughout the session if we can, and then at the end as much as possible. Before we dive in, I wanted to thank just some of our funders here on the screen who support the work of Food Recovery Network, including these roundtable talks that allow us to be transparent about our work and to support the greater food recovery movement. Here's some more of our funders here as well. And then the other folks that are joining me are Katie Jones, our Chief Operating Officer, and Regina Anderson, our Executive Director. So I'll let both of them introduce themselves and share a couple words. Katie, you can go ahead and get us started.
Hey, hi everyone. It's lovely to see you all here today. Thank you so much for joining. We're really excited to share with you our progress so far and hear your questions. So please do keep them coming in the chat.
Great, thanks Katie and Regina.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much to our board members, our donors, our funders. It's so wonderful to see everybody here and to spend time in live time. I'm really excited to hear from all of you. And thank you to Cassie and Katie for making this conversation possible.
I'll just give it a couple minutes as folks continue to join in.
Thanks everyone for rejoining our conversation. I know somebody, whoever was just the 22nd person to come back onto the conversation, I think all the celestial moments right now are aligning and gives us a little bit of levity for our day today on February 22nd, 2020.
Yes, sorry everyone about that. We just had some technical difficulties, but we should hopefully be good from here on out. So thanks again so much for joining. We'll continue with the conversation. So now I'll turn it over to Regina for some acknowledgements before we dive in.
Thank you. And let me one more time iterate to say thank you, Cassie and Katie and Elaine, who is off screen right now, for your support in making today's conversation possible. So I know we'll have a poll soon to see everyone who maybe has attended these roundtable talks before, or maybe perhaps this is your first conversation with us. But welcome everyone. As I was saying before, I'm so thankful to see everybody with us live time. We have some of our board members, we have institutional funders with us, we have individual donors with us, we have chapters with us, alums. Thank you all so much for being with us today. For those of you who are maybe unfamiliar, Food Recovery Network, we love to start off our conversations by acknowledging the ancestors who have inhabited the land that we are all on now. So our offices are in the Washington, D.C. area. And so this is the land of the Piscataway Conoy. And here's a little bit of information about the Piscataway Conoy. And there's other bands, tribes, indigenous peoples who have inhabited this land. And another thing that you have seen over the course of the launch of Food Recovery's Afro-10X has been our stance that Black Lives Matter, that we want to stop Asian hate, that Food Recovery Network's Afro-10X, our strategic framework, has been built on equity. And we've talked a lot about what that means and how we are walking in equity through Afro-10X in a variety of different ways. And so what you're going to start to see is a transition from, we wanted to give a lot of space to talk about equity, to talk about the current moments that we're living in right now, and that moving forward, we might not always necessarily pull out some of those stances that we have. We will acknowledge our land, absolutely, for sure, and the stewards of our air, our water, and our land. But in terms of our equity conversation, we feel that we've given a lot of space to that without necessarily pulling that out every single time. So I just wanted to let everyone know about that transition, and we still firmly believe in equity. Again, that's what Afro-10X is all about. And so if anyone has questions about that, please feel free to let me know. But we have lots of content on our website, all of our writing and conversations like this. Also, I wanted to respectfully move into further the conversation that brings us here today. And so thank you for allowing me to have that space to do that. As someone again noted in the comments, that today, for the first time and the only time in our lives, today is February 22nd, 2022, and we have some really exciting news that we wanted to announce to everyone. And so we thought it might be kind of fun if you all want to unmute yourselves, and if we could do a little bit of a drum roll while I make this next announcement. So thank you for that. We are so proud to let everyone know about this milestone. We have a couple of milestones, two today, lots of twos happening today. We are so proud of the fact that we have recovered more than 2 million pounds of food during the course of this program year. As Cassie mentioned, we work on the semester. So over 2 million pounds of food that we've recovered all across the US to help feed our neighbors, our loved ones in need. We are so proud of that. And also, Afro-10X has expanded, so we are now over 200 chapters across the United States. So again, twos everywhere. So thank you to all of our incredible chapters that are on this conversation right now with us. It's because of you that we've been able to get to this 2 million pound mark this program year. We have more than 200 chapters. And so we thought to celebrate on February 22nd, 2022, that we wanted to have a little bit of fun with this. We always talk about the fact that our students and those who are standing beside us to recover food to feed our neighbors in need, that when you are faced with the work of food recovery and you're feeding neighbors in need, if you're experiencing hunger, that's a lot of weight on our shoulders. And within that, it means too that there's a lot of hope, there's a lot of inspiration. And if you've ever been on a recovery, you know that act, it can be so much fun. And so we wanted to bring that love, respect, and laughter into this celebration, into this milestone. So thank you all for celebrating with us. And we also thought to continue on to get many more twos and maybe, start to convert to threes, 3 million pounds of food, 300 chapters, 3,000 chapters, that if it is within your opportunity, within your budget, we are launching a fun campaign to donate $22 to help FRN to continue to recover food all across the United States. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for the drum roll. Make sure to spread the word about this historic moment for FRN, these wonderful milestones. And again, every single person on this conversation has helped us to get to where we are today.
Amazing. Thank you, Regina, and thank you, everyone, for that. Before I dive in further into the roundtable, we want to get a gist of who's on the call with us here today. So I'm going to launch a poll. And if you've been a part of the Roundtable Talks, you've probably seen this before. On your screen, you'll see a different amount of, or different types of affiliations. We want to see who's on the call with us here today. Are you a student? Are you generally just a community supporter, food service professional, or food recovery verified business, or a hunger fighting partner or higher education professional? So I'll leave that up just for a couple of seconds longer. I see some results coming in. All right, great. I'm going to end the poll now, and I'll share with everyone else so we can all see who's on the call here today. So it looks like we have a good amount of community supporters, which is great. Another good chunk of hunger fighting nonprofit partners with other food recovery verified businesses on the call, some students as well, of course, and higher education. This is a good spread. Thank you so much for everyone joining with us here today. So I shared a little bit briefly about why we do the Roundtable Talks, but to dive in a little bit deeper, a big reason why we started doing this is just to really share our data and our learning that we've had thus far. Like I mentioned, we're about halfway through our program year, and so we'll be able to share a snapshot of what the last 6 months looks like. Another reason is to be able to provide a feedback loop and getting a lot of different ideas from the folks on our network here. So we really encourage you to engage in the chat, share any ideas that you have, thoughts that you have, questions, because we really, third reason is we want to deepen our relationship with the folks in our network. We're a large network nationwide, and of course we can't always see each other, especially now. And so we wanted to provide this as an opportunity in order to be able to connect with one another better. So another poll that I have for you all is we're curious to see if anyone has previously joined the Roundtable Talks before. We've hosted these for a little over a year now, so let us know if you've attended one of these. I'll launch the poll now, and I see some respondents coming in. All right, I'll leave it up just for another second. Okay, great. I'm going to end the poll now and share so other folks can see as well. It looks like there's a good chunk of folks that have not attended FRN's Roundtable Talks before, about 64%, and then 36 who have previously joined. So that's a really great spread. It's so great to see so many new faces and folks that are going to be able to join us today. So especially since we don't have a ton of folks that have, or that we do have a ton of folks that have not attended the Roundtable Talks before, maybe this won't look as familiar for the folks that haven't joined us before. A reason, like I said, one of the purposes we have of these Roundtable Talks is to provide a feedback loop and also just understanding and deepening our relationship with our network. And so another question we have, and the final poll that I'll have for you all in this moment is, where do you see yourself on a spectrum of engagement with FRN? I'll launch the poll now. Do you see yourself on the more informing status of you're looking to understand what FRN is doing, what type of programs and services we offer? Are you looking to take a more consulting role so we can have this back and forth conversation on providing different ideas? Or are you looking for more deeper partnership of being able to work on a specific project together or provide a lot of feedback kind of back and forth and sharing our data? So share us what you think along the spectrum, what you'd be most interested in. Leave it up for just another second. And I will share the results. So it looks like we have a good chunk of folks informing. I know we've seen that before. And a lot of the reason why we do these roundtable talks is just to be able to share some folks in consulting and some folks in partnering. And I'm also curious for the folks that have joined us before, has that gone up on the scale perhaps the further that you come into these roundtable talks, the more you learn about FRN? Let us know in the chat if your response has changed over time. We'd love to hear that. All right, and with that, I will turn it back to Regina to dive in a bit further into what we're talking about here today. Regina?
Great. Thank you so much, Cassie. And again, thank you all so much for your participation in the polls. We always like to, as Cassie said, understand who's in the room. And Tim, thank you for your questions. Please keep them coming. Everyone, please keep your questions coming. We will have a Q&A section at the end, as Cassie mentioned, but throughout, if we can, we will answer questions that we see coming up. So we'd love to talk with you more, Tim, about FRV. But since there are so many of you where this is your very first conversation about Food Recovery Network, joining our roundtable conversation, I just wanted to ground everyone in the work of Food Recovery Network as it relates to why are we engaged in the work that we're doing? What does that 2 million pounds of food recovered milestone actually mean? And this is what we're trying to do. This is the work that we're trying to do. We want to recover food to feed everyone who is hungry in the United States. And I just want to give that a little bit of space, in our minds and in our hearts as we think about the conversation ahead of us and how FRN is engaged in this work. And, we've been around since 2011, how we've continued to do this work. And we need all of you to be part of this work. If you've ever seen any of the conversations that we've had in the past that are all on our website, I often say, I want everyone to feel part of the work that we're doing. Even all of you who said, I want to be informed, being part of this conversation today is seeing yourself in that work. We all have a role to play to make that number 42 million people. Now, these are our neighbors, our loved ones. Every single zip code has hunger. We want that number to be 0. And we know that Food Recovery Network has a unique contribution to work towards that goal, to recover surplus food to feed everyone who is hungry in the US. And so I was just wondering, as we're thinking about what's in store for FRN over the next 10 years, we currently have about 4,000 people, all of you on the call today, that are in our network. And we want to grow that number to 40,000 people over the next 10 years. What are some ideas that you have? How do you think Food Recovery Network can grow our impact? We're going to talk a lot about the different things that we've done this program year over the last 6 months. And again, we have so much information about what we've done over the last 10 years thus far. There's been a lot of changes over the course of the last decade or so. But these conversations are really to think about your ideas. How can we be inspired by the connections that you have, the resources that you have, the ideas that you have to help us to grow to get to that 40,000. Now, keep chatting. We're going to continue on into the conversation because we have a lot to cover. And again, sorry for the tech glitch. But big, small, whatever is on your mind about growing the number of people who are engaged in food recovery, ideas around food recovery, just let us know what you're thinking. And again, I know that many of you, this is your first time here. And for some of you, even though it might not be your first time, again, to ground everyone in FRN 10X, what I'm calling FRN 10X is our results count framework. So this is our blueprint for how we will go about achieving our results. The results that we are working to achieve is to recover surplus food to feed everyone who is hungry in the United States. Now, on our website, we have a whole entire section about the Roundtable Talks, where we go in depth about the results count framework. If you haven't signed up for our newsletter, please do, because we're not going to go in a lot of depth today, but I just wanted to have this slide to remind everyone about our blueprint. And when we think about our 2 areas of work, our bedrock work and our systems change work, and then the factor, what are we trying to do? We want to mitigate waste. We're going to recover surplus food, and we're fighting climate change. And we have 3 strategies within to, again, get up to that result of recovering surplus food. So if you have questions, about the results count framework, which we're also calling efferent 10x, please chat them here, and we will have that Q&A at the end of the conversation.
Thanks, Regina. We did have a quick question. If you could repeat the stat that you mentioned about hunger across zip codes.
Oh, yes. So there are 42 million people who are food insecure right now. And food insecurity is defined as you do not have consistent access to obtain the food that you need, the food that you deserve, or the food that your family deserves. And so sadly, at this moment in time, hunger it's prevalent in every single state, every single county, all communities. And we're working hard to ensure, again, with our results count framework, efferent 10x, that number, 42 million people, too many of whom are children, that number gets down to 0. And we pull those numbers from Feeding America. And you can actually go to their website, and I think we have a link on ours too, that you can go by county, how many people are food insecure, and what it would take monetarily to get that number down to 0.
Great, thank you.
And then very quickly, I just wanted to go in a little bit deeper in the 3 strategies that I mentioned within efferent 10x, our results count framework. We have 3 strategies for this program year. And the first one, was to recover 2 million pounds of food. Now, and when we recover that food and we don't bring that food into landfill, what we're also doing is helping to support a healthier environment, a healthier planet, because that is diverting CO2 emissions from being present. So when the food goes into landfill, it rots and it creates CO2 emissions. But when we bring that food to where it needs to go and people are actually consuming that food, we're preventing that CO2 from being created. So, and Cassie's going to talk a bit more about the breakdown of the 2 million pounds, like where in our work do these pounds come from? Because actually, with our chapters and everyone living through this pandemic, we were hoping to see more of our chapters able to recover food. Now they're engaging in a lot of other amazing things that are so important to that systems change work. But Cassie will have more information for you about that as well. And then we wanted to bring on 20 to 30 new chapters, and we wanted to develop 3 powerful partnerships this program year. So we're really excited to talk with you all about what that has looked like over the past 6 months. Let's see. And now, and I guess we have a couple of slides that talk to that first goal of 2 million pounds of food. And again, Cassie will have a little bit more information about that. And so I also wanted to now turn things over to Katie as we dig in a bit more on goal number 2, that new chapter growth.
Before we dive into that, to your point, Regina, I wanted to share a little bit on that breakdown. And I know Tim mentioned about talking about carbon offsets, and I know you mentioned the CO2 emissions. So we do track our CO2 emissions saved based on, as Regina said, in terms of pounds recovered. And to break that down further on the pounds recovered specifically, as a lot of you know, we have partnered deeply with the FarmLink project to help move food from that is surplus left on farm fields and into communities experiencing hunger. And so that is a significant portion of the pounds recovered that we've had in the last year, again, already surpassing that 2 million pounds of food recovered and looking to go beyond that. A lot of, and Katie will dive in further specifically on our chapter work of student-based food recovery. That is also a portion of our specific poundage that we've had in the last year, and Katie will dive in deeper on what that looks like. And then finally, we have an Atlantic gleaning project that we partnered with the EPA in the last year. We won't be diving into that too much today, but towards the end of the time here, we'll be sharing a link for a dedicated webinar on that great pilot and diving into how all of that work happened. So now I will turn it to you, Katie, to dive in deeper a little bit into that chapter work specifically.
Great, thank you so much. So part of my role here as Chief Operating Officer is to actually oversee our programmatic work. So specifically right now, I'm going to spend a couple minutes talking about our chapters, which is really our bedrock work. And this goal in particular is where you can see FRN 10X in practice, because it shows, again, how we are supporting our network of students nationwide, but we're also specifically targeting 10 states where we feel if we can put our model there, we'll have an outsized impact. And that is where the data really comes into play. Specifically, when you look at our indicators of where there is the most surplus food in the United States, and you overlay that with the Feeding America data of where there is the most number of people experiencing hunger, which again are our two indicators from FRN 10X, and then you overlay that again with where we do or do not have chapters. That's how we came up with our 10 states. And we set this goal because, again, we want to have a mind to how we can support the network as a whole, but then also really be in tune with the different needs where there's going to be a disproportionate need and impact in our work. So I'm going to tell you a little bit in the next slide about how we're doing on this recruitment and progress, but I'm also going to share a little bit about what we're doing to course correct. But the first thing I really want to say is that our chapters are our foundation. They are our lifeline to our communities across the United States. And we're so thankful when our students send in wonderful tributes like this. This was specifically collected through our end of semester survey. And another special shout out to the students on the call today. Thank you so much for the work you do. We're so grateful for your partnership in this work. And this is just a tribute to everybody on the call about the impact that we're having with both our students and in our communities overall. So let's turn a little bit to actually how we're doing. And overall, we're actually we're in really good shape. Our goal was to recruit upwards of 30 chapters to our network. We're already at 24 as of the end of last semester, which is great. So our total chapter count now is at 204. What I will say is there has been a disproportionate joining of the chapters that it's not necessarily in our 10 states. So while we have joined 24 new chapters, only 4 new chapters have been in our target states. So that's not necessarily surprising to us because, again, the climate for certain chapters is better in other states than some different ones. So part of what we're doing this year is really trying to target, in particular, California and Pennsylvania. They're 2 of our target states, and they have the largest number of colleges and universities. So we're specifically recruiting students in those 2 states through social media outreach, as well as through campus tabling, again, as soon as it's safe to do so with COVID, to really try and grow our footprint in these 2 states in particular for right now, and then continuing to grow across the 10. The other thing that we're doing, which we'll be launching at the end of this week, is actually hosting a Refer a Friend program through our networks currently, because we know the dedicated students in our movement are the best source to find new dedicated students in our movement. And so we'll share a little bit about that on the next slide. So that's a little bit about our progress to date. This is a slide that talks a little bit about pounds recovered so far. And the biggest thing to share is the majority of our chapters, 85%, are still experiencing some COVID-related challenges. What that specifically means is there, number one, has been a lot of turnover on the dining service side because of COVID. So our students left campus with one set of dining provider partners and are coming back to a completely new staff. So it's taken a lot of time to build new relationships with the current staffing there. Secondly, nonprofit agencies who usually receive our food, some have actually changed their guidelines in terms of what they will and will not accept. So in some cases, our students have had to find new partner agencies who are willing to accept prepared food. And there's also been a really big change in the shared vehicles that students could sometimes access through campus to actually transport the food off campus. And in some cases, universities have actually stopped providing that. So part of what we're doing to help our students with these challenges is work with our great partners at Sodexo and Aramark to help make those connections with dining service providers. And where possible, we're also providing supplemental transportation support, again, so we can get the food where it's most needed. Lastly, we are also trying to connect our campuses with nonprofits that we might have through FRV or another way to, again, help improve the flow of the pounds we are going to recover. I will say, despite these challenges, we are starting to see an uptick in what our students are able to recover. We're nowhere near where we would be pre-pandemic, but that's pretty much expected. But it's nice to see the growth and trajectory of about 80,000 pounds more than in the fall of last year. The last thing I'm going to say about chapters in particular is a really big change that we made at the beginning of COVID was actually diversifying how our chapters could activate. Prior to COVID, you could only activate by recovering food, but we know that's just one action in a broader concert of awareness and activism that has to happen around these issues. So again, aligned with our strategic framework and the 3 strategies, we also allowed students to and supported students in activating through advocacy as well as community engagements. So this will be the second full year that students are able to do this. And what's super interesting is that many of our chapters have actually really diversified how they want to engage their chapters. And this gives you a little bit of a breakdown in terms of how that's happening, which is great because one of the things that we've heard from our students is that they understand that recovering food is a vital, immediate need in the community. But if we're actually going to help on the scale of 42 million people, we have to get into the policy realm. We have to mobilize more partners in order to make that happen. So this has been a really exciting development with our chapter work, and we're really excited to see where it goes. So let me stop there.
Thank you, Katie. And we also wanted to share just some of these photos that we have from some chapter recoveries that have taken place in the last year. Students in here include those from University of San Francisco, Kansas State University, and Loyola University of Chicago. Katie briefly mentioned that refer a friend model, so I wanted to dive in a little bit deeper into that, specifically for the students on the call, if this might be of interest to you. This is the first time that we're doing something like this, so we're testing out to see how it goes, and it'll launch officially later this week and run all the way through Stop Food Waste Day, which is in April. And what we'll be doing, and primarily on social media, is encouraging chapters and other students in our network to tag and refer their friends at other colleges and universities to start an FRN chapter on their campus. And ultimately, at the end of the couple months that we'll be running this campaign, the chapter that has the most amount of referrals that come through will be able to be named our food recovery champion for 2022. And the chapter will receive a goodie basket full of important supplies for your food recoveries and some fun stuff from FRN National. You'll also be featured on our blog and our social media. We'll be able to share our full network a little bit more about your specific chapter. And then also any new chapters that come through with this specific campaign, we'll be able to send them their first recovery food kit. This was an idea that was brought forth by our Student Alumni Advisory Board, saying like, if I could just give something for the compostable pans or for just having the supplies needed for those first few food recoveries, that would be really helpful to get my chapter up and running. And so to answer their call, we're running this model and looking to engage our students. So for the students on the call, or even if there's anyone else on the call, if you have someone in your network that's a college student that might be interested in this work, you can definitely stay in tuned with this campaign that'll be happening on our Instagram and social media. And you can also email us. Our contact information will be at the end if you're interested to participate in that. Katie also briefly mentioned a bit about our chapter food recoveries and all the challenges that we've seen that students have experienced in the last year. And so with the chapter poundage being a little bit lower than what we anticipated, of course, with the pandemic, something that we've done in the past is host end of semester food drives. Our students will pop up on their campus and collect any non-perishable, unopened, food safe items from college dorms and apartments as students are moving out for the summer. And so if there's any students on the call that are interested in hosting one of these for your chapter, maybe it's a unique, interesting way to engage your larger campus, or maybe you haven't been able to do as many active food recoveries, it could be a neat way to engage volunteers in your chapter. Elaine will drop a chat, including a link to a call that we'll be having in March to share the nuts and bolts of how you can go about in setting up this for your own chapter. So with that, I will now turn it over to Regina that'll talk about our final goal about powerful partnerships. And we definitely encourage folks to keep the questions and thoughts coming.
Thanks, Cassie. Yes, and thank you, Katie, for the information that you provided as well. As you can hear, there's a lot that's happening within FRN. And again, I want to iterate more and more and more that, if you please consider this your formal invitation to be part of this work. And I know many of you are part of this work. That's why you're here. And please do continue to spread the word to others who might not know about what Food Recovery Network is doing across the United States to feed more people faster. And so we know at Food Recovery Network, one of our strategies is through powerful partnerships, because that is how we are able to do more. Our impact is multiplied when we have authentic relationships. And I wanted to highlight just a few of those, because we, as you'll see with the rest of this program year, we'll have more opportunities for all of you to get to know these powerful partners, and there'll be more conversations with the groups that are part of these powerful partnerships. And I'll be really quick, because again, we have information about all these groups on our website, through our blogs, our Intersectionalities in Practice, which is our almost monthly webinar series, where there'll be lots more content to dive in deeply. And so wanted to say thank you to the National Association of Realtors, or NAR for short. NAR also sits on our board of directors, and they support us through our Food Recovery Verified program, where they are working to get all of their members across the United States. They're the largest trade association in the world. They have NAR members in every single state, and their reach is vast. And what they're working to do is to have their NAR membership, when their membership is having an event, to be Food Recovery Verified. And I know there was a question about what is Food Recovery Verified, and thank you, Elaine, for putting the link to FRV for short, Food Recovery Verified. And this is how we can support events, convention centers, corporate dining, anyone, even within higher education, to support a recovery program in place. Surplus food happens for a variety of reasons, and FRN can be sure that through partnership, that your event, corporate dining, whatever it might be, has a recovery plan in place. So learn more about Food Recovery Verified. And again, NAR, a wonderful partner of ours, to have that multiplier effect, has supported FRN to be able to recover more food through their events, to educate through their unique research that they've been able to do for us. It's just been a wonderful partnership. And I know some of you mentioned the Super Bowl event that Cassie and I were just at last weekend. Feels like longer than that at this point. But because of the support of NAR financially supporting FRN, we were able to go to the Super Bowl with only a couple of weeks notice to get there and recover almost 2,000 pounds of food for the communities within Los Angeles. So thanks to NAR. And then another really amazing national partnership that we have, it's actually national and statewide, but I'll focus in on the national, is with the Poor People's Campaign. Through the Poor People's Campaign, again, in November, we had a conversation with their policy director, Shally Barnes. We are working with them to stand beside them for the Fight for 15. I actually just soon will release a blog post that goes into more detail about the partnership with the Poor People's Campaign. You know, why do we have a powerful partnership with the Poor People's Campaign, and what is this Fight for 15? The Fight for 15 is to increase the federal minimum wage from $7.25 currently right now to $15 an hour minimum. And the reason why we have partnered with Poor People's Campaign around the Fight for 15 is for a couple of reasons. When we think about the, as I mentioned before, you know, our systems change work. One of the indicators that we know that the unique contribution of FRN is working is that we can help support the economic security of the 42 million people who are currently food insecure. And when we know, thanks to our partnership with NAR, if you are food insecure, chances are very high that you are also housing insecure. And they have research that shows that link between food insecurity and housing insecurity. Now, I've mentioned this to you know, everyone multiple times, that I myself am a product of a family that was working poor. What does that mean? Well, it meant both of my mom and my dad worked about 60 hours a week, every week, minimum wage, slightly above minimum wage, and it was never enough to fully make our house complete. There was always struggle. And so we're working with Poor People's Campaign to increase the federal minimum wage to help support the economic security of the 42 million people who are working right now, they're working poor or in poverty. We think about our students, we think about the partner agencies all across the United States who are supporting our neighbors in need. This is directly talking to our stakeholders. You know, when we think about who's working shift work, who's working hourly wages, who's entering into their careers for the first time, where that minimum wage affects us the most, and it really is the constituents of Food Recovery Network. So that's why we're working to support that minimum wage increase to $15 an hour. And I also just wanted to show everyone that another thing that we are doing around our bedrock work to ensure people get the food that they need every day through policy change. So this is a nice transition from our bedrock work, feeding people every day, that systems change work, is to update policy. And one of the ways that we're asking everyone to support us is through the expansion of the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Food Donation Act. Now, this was enacted in 1996, and thanks so much for WW for being on this call, another partner of ours. We're working to expand what this means so that we are able to, again, increase the amount of donations by clarifying the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan law that was enacted in 1996. So we're doing work around that, and there is a petition that you can sign to help Congress know that, yes, we want to be able to expand and clarify what foods can be donated, to whom can they be donated, and who can donate that food. So again, this policy support will help us to ensure the economic security of those who are currently food insecure right now, 42 million people.
Thank you, Regina. And I know Elaine will be sharing the link to that petition in the chat here shortly. So to kind of wrap up, we touched on each of those three goals that we have as our primarily goals for this year and about halfway through. Now I want to turn it over back to Katie J to share a little bit about how these learnings and this data that we've gathered in the last 6 months will help to inform the second half of the year and beyond.
Great, thank you, Cassie. So what does all this data mean? What sense do we make out of it? How is that going to change what we do moving forward? And the two things that we talk about a lot is how we really need to flex working at different altitudes. So for 10 years, FRN has been on the ground with students every day with the nuts and bolts of how do we actually help recover perfectly good food, make sure it doesn't go to waste, and repurpose that food to people who need it. And that will continue. But with FRN 10X, we've really started to look at our strategies overall for how we can start operating on a scale that would service 42 million people. It's just a very different way of working. And we really need to flex that muscle. And that's a big priority for us moving forward, is how we're going to build that muscle. So we particularly have our eye on how we broaden our relationships beyond food. And what this means is working in closer partnership with allies such as the Poor People's Campaign, because the Fight for 15 disproportionately impacts college students. So how are we thinking of those broader systemic issues and how FRN can play a role in that? Because it's going to continue to be a problem. People will continue to be food insecure unless we actually change the pillars that keep these things in place. So that's one of the reasons why we asked at the beginning of this call, like, what are some of your ideas for how we can really broaden our reach? The gleaning work is a perfect example of, that was beyond our original scope, but because we've changed the way students can mobilize their chapters, now we're able to partner in gleaning efforts in a way that we've never done before, and that's substantially amplified our impact. So what are some other flexes that we could possibly do? And again, we want to hear that from the field so we can think about that in the context of the impact we want to have. Also, again, thank you to the funders and the donors that we have on this call, because your support and your continued flexibility has allowed us to have the kind of impact that we have of recovering 2 million pounds of food in about 6 months, which is pretty incredible. The flexibility that we've had to go to the Super Bowl, or as I'm seeing in the chat, some of these other upcoming sporting events. That's the kind of work that, again, can help us mobilize students in particular communities to redistribute that food, which in our case is really the Venn diagram that we're really looking to have all of our work fit into. So we're continuing to look for those types of events where we can engage students within the communities that really broaden where we recover from. So one of the topics that we didn't talk about on this webinar, but I'll put in a plug for one that will be next week, is our Atlanta gleaning work, where we were able to run isolated pilots within Atlanta for how we feed people faster. And that's work that we're also going to look to scale and to replicate in the coming year, which is, again, another example of how we're going to broaden our relationships and flex in different ways so we can continue to recover more food faster. So let me stop there for what questions people might have.
Yes, thank you, Katie. I know we did have a question that came in asking if the presentation recording will be on the FRN website. And yes, it will be. Once we download it, we'll upload it to our YouTube, and we'll make sure to update our website on the Roundtable Talks page. And then, of course, the recording will be emailed to everyone as well. I know we also did get a question that came in through earlier, so I will prompt it for you, Regina. I know that, let's see, the question is, how effective is your reach into HBCUs specifically? I know you wanted to address that, Regina.
Yes, and thank you for that question. I wanted to start globally by saying, our work is to support higher education being the first sector where food recovery is the norm and not the exception. FRN was started by college students. It was grassroots, from college students calling up their friends at other schools and universities across the United States. That's our history, is that student effect of students who care about ensuring that their neighbors are being fed and that we're not harming our environment by throwing away all this beautiful, delicious, grown with love food. And so we want everyone in higher education to have a recovery program on their college campus. Within that, we have had, we'd love to have more HBCUs in our network. We want this to be an inclusive space. We want this to feel like, everyone can be part of the efforts. And so we do have several HBCUs as part of our network, and we're really proud of that. And in fact, I wanted to say thank you to one of our board members who helped to get Morehouse just recently as part of the, to join the FRN network. It's an amazing thing. When we think about the 10 states that we were talking about earlier, when we continue to dig into who is being most affected by inequality. So again, when we think about who is being affected by this disastrous minimum wage, when we think about who is, being saddled with student debt, when we think about the communities that are faced with the most food insecurity, soon when we begin to talk about environmental racism, we see that more and more the communities that are affected the most are communities of color. And therefore, we know that we want to have more HBCUs as part of the work to feed the communities who are faced with the hardships, living here in the United States. And again, we all have a role to play. So if any of you have connections to colleges and universities that are historically Black colleges and universities, please do let us know, because we absolutely want to increase the numbers in our network. And I will say just really quickly within that, when we think about where universities are situated all across the country, they're not always necessarily in communities of color. So where the food is, where the universities are, and the need to get that surplus food, it's actually quite the web. And so that's why we need to activate everybody to ensure that our neighbors are getting the food that they deserve. So thanks for that. And again, there's more information about all of that on our website.
Thank you, Regina, for answering that question. We did have another question that came through that Katie answered through the chat, and I also wanted to bubble up here. Jake asked if we were looking into high school frameworks and things like that. And for legal reasons, it becomes a little bit more complicated when you're working with folks that are under 18. So at this time, we're not engaging with high school students specifically, although I personally know there are ones that reach out, and we definitely applaud them for their interest in their work. And I will also add, under our Food Recovery Verified umbrella, we have worked with dining providers that are at K through 12 schools as well. So just for the timing wise, I'm going to start to wrap us up here. I know Elaine is working on the other end. Oh, I'll actually launch our final poll. We have a final poll for folks here today. We want to know, to what extent have you felt informed about the work of FRN on our time here today? So I will go ahead and launch that poll now. And while folks answer that, we wanted to share just another quote from one of our student leaders about how they felt that this work has grounded them in the love for their neighbor, and has also engaged the folks in their chapter as well. So I'll leave that poll up just for a couple more seconds. And I will share the results. It looks like a lot of the folks on the call are very informed. Some felt somewhat informed. If you have any other questions, definitely follow up with us after this call here today. We're glad to continue to chat with you. And thank you all for joining. The last couple of things that I have for us here today is just a few requests and actions for the group. Again, a lot of this work is really detailed and through the support of our network. So it's really important just to kind of further enhance that. So if there's anyone that you think would be interested in this work or learning more about the work of FRN, please share this recording with them. Also, in honor of 2/22/22, if it's able for you to donate to our organization, we would greatly appreciate it. And all of those donations will go directly to supporting our program and our staff to further this work. Like we talked earlier about the refer a friend model that will be coming up. Keep an eye out on our social media. Encourage a friend to start an FRN chapter. You can also sign up for our newsletter and social media to stay up to date. And you can tell 2 people about our mission as well. And then just the last couple of next steps, if anyone's particularly interested, I know Elaine will send some things in the chat here shortly. We briefly mentioned our Atlanta gleaning pilots. If you want to learn more about the work that we were able to do there, we'll be having a call later in March. And then also for the chapter leaders and students on the call, we'll be sharing that link to the call for the end of semester food drive as well. So we hope you join us there. In the last couple minutes, I wanted to see Katie and Regina if you had any final closing thoughts.
I just want to say thank you for everyone for your comments and for taking the time today. We look forward to being in touch.
Echo that. And for those of you who felt somewhat informed, I want to make sure to bump you up to very informed. Please be in touch. This is just a snapshot. So we want to make sure that you are getting that information that you need in the rhythm that makes the most sense for you. And then also just a sneak peek, we are talking with Robert Egger for our students to activate around, policy work and what does that mean in March as well. So be on the lookout for that too. So thank you all so much for your time today.
Thanks all. Thank you, Katie and Regina, and thank you, Elaine, for the behind the scenes work. We appreciate all of your time and happy Tuesday. Bye all.
Happy Tuesday.